Так, добрый день. Напишите, пожалуйста, как меня слышно. Как меня слышно, как меня видно.
What?
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay, great. I'm gonna start. My name is Anton Burkov. I'm gonna run this lecture today on bioethics, bioethical questions, and it's a two-part lecture. The first one will be devoted to the issue of artificial insemination, right to artificial insemination, and mostly prisoners and their family members. And the second part will be next week, the same time, 18th of January, and we will talk about other aspects of bioethics questions. Another question, a bioethical question, which is actually which concerns everybody in this classroom, everybody in Russia, even foreigners. It's secret organ harvesting. We will talk about currently used procedure of removing organs from dead people and implanting it into patients to save somebody's life. But this is next week. Today we will talk about artificial insemination. Before I go to deeper into this issue, I will introduce myself more. I got a law degree from Ural State University some years ago. And at this, when I was a student of the last years of the school, I started practicing law. I happened to join an NGO which works on human rights issue. And almost right away, we started to practice before the European Court of Human Rights. Russia just when I joined the NGO, Russia ratified the European Convention of Human Rights, which means that, among other things, people can apply to the international court, and people can actually sue Russia and seek for damages and expenses. So I have about 20 years experience working with European Court of Human Rights. And you see this abbreviation ECHR. I'm going to use it very often, which means the European Court of Human Rights. I've been studying back and forth abroad. I joined Essex University in the UK, which for me was very much famous because of the human rights program. So I did my LLM degree there. And then a few years later, I applied to write my PhD thesis at Cambridge University, also in England. And my thesis was also about the European Convention on Human Rights, how it's applied in Russia, how Russian lawyers or victims of human rights violation can use European Convention on Human Rights. This is the convention which the European Court applies in its work. How all of us can use this instrument, not in Strasbourg, not in the before the European Court of Human Rights, but before Russian courts. And actually, this lecture and then lecture next week will be based, it's like a practical implementation of what I researched at Cambridge. I did some books on human rights and European Convention. I'm going to share with you one of those books, or all of them if you want, if you have time, if you're interested in this topic further. But particularly one book which is easy to read, which is not like a legal book, which is usually boring. But this book was written based on the cases which I'm going to share with you today and next week. Also, just before I forget, please use chat to ask any questions you have, and I will stop and answer your questions, or at the end of the lecture we'll have lots of time to answer questions. Last year I was a visiting scholar at Harvard Law School, and unfortunately it was the time of the start of the coronavirus. The isolation at Harvard was great. I very much enjoyed it, and I worked mostly on how to share this experience, how to teach lawyers and regular citizens how to apply to the European Court of Human Rights. And I developed this online course on this issue. And I also head of Strategic Litigation Center, which is non-for-profit organization. It's not a state-owned, it's not for-profit. We created it in 2018, actually as a result of the Urals International Human Rights School, which we started in 2011, where we taught mostly human rights activists, doesn't matter lawyers or non-lawyers. And based on this experience, where we had about 700 alumni, we decided we will set up a special NGO for this, and particularly special project, ECHR Navigator. So we started Strategic Litigation Center, which goal is to bring cases to Russian courts and European Court of Human Rights, and run these cases strategically. It's like playing chess. Before we filing any case, we're really thinking strategically how we can get to the results. And the result, very often the result is not to win a case for a client. The result is to change the law, change the legal practice. And today and next week, I'm going to show you how we do this through this example, through the examples of cases that we are bringing. And the second goal is to share our experience, and we do it in two ways. We share it with journalists. We're trying to publish the stories widely and in accessible language, not in legalized language. And the second way we share it is through education. And now, actually, even before the coronavirus started, we started our project online to lower the cost so it could be accessible for lower income people. So this has my contacts. If you will have any questions afterwards, if you're interested in this issue, in these topics, please feel free to contact me. And here is the our main online educational project, ECHR Navigator. It has a website, echrnavigator.rf, and echrnavigator.ru. So feel free to check if you. Our mission in this educational project, we believe that anyone, even without a law degree, can bring application, can compose application and bring it before the European Court of Human Rights. It sounds difficult to apply to the International Court, but we figure out we can simplify it. And if you follow particular steps, anybody can do it. It doesn't matter. In my experience, there are non-lawyers who can write applications to the European Court of Human Rights much better than advocati, lawyers with law degree and bar membership. So, and that's there for this purpose, we developed a specially designed course which can help anyone to bring case to the European Court. And this is the mission of the Strategic Litigation Center, and particularly the educational project is to lead anyone to Strasbourg, where the European Court of Human Rights is located. Not literally to lead to Strasbourg, but figuratively. It's like язык до Киева доведет. Yes, your language, your ability to speak will bring you to Kiev. And if to say it about our project is, you can reach European Court of Human Rights if you do some steps. Okay, and now we shall start with artificial insemination case. How it is so far? You can hear me, you understand me. If you please write in the chat plus or minuses. Plus, if everything is okay, we can continue. Good. Good. Okay. If you hear from me some terms which you don't know, please send reminder to the chat, and I will explain. So, artificial insemination case, or Korolyov's case. I will start with a history. By the way, this case, Korolyov's case, is very old now. We started it in 1996. Long before we created our NGO. It was at the time when I started my first work at the Russian NGO. Initially, it wasn't even the Korolyov's case, was a different name, but the same issue, and we continue litigating it. And the first result we got was, we started this case in 2004, and the first result we got was in 2016. So 14 years to change the legislation, to make a small change. Well, maybe not small, but so that's me. That's kind of show you what is strategic litigation. It's not like to bring a lawsuit on damages and in 1 year you get your damages, or 2 years. It takes a lot of time and a lot of litigation. Maybe not one case. When I say Korolyov's case, which is after the name of the family, last name of the family, it actually means at least 6 lawsuits, different lawsuits. I'm going to show you how it works in practice. And I will start with the history. You probably, anybody watched this movie? 10 лет без права переписки. Did you watch this movie?
No.
You can send a plus or minus. Actually, I would recommend it to watch. It's a good history of Russia. 10 years without the right to write each other. It's actually, it was used as an expression. Well, first of all, it's a legal term used during the 1930s, 40s, during the repression time, which is a part of the sentence. people were sentenced to imprisonment without the right to write to their relatives for at least 10 years. In practice, it usually meant that those who were sentenced are most likely are dead already. So it was a capital punishment. But anyway, if you have time, please watch it. It's good movie. So, but in 1996, capital punishment was replaced by the life sentence. And it happened because Russia joined the Council of Europe. Council of Europe, this is different from European Union. European Union, it's an economical entity, union, organization, international organization. The Council of Europe is a different one. It's based in Strasbourg, and under this international organization, there are a number of international treaties, including the European Convention on Human Rights, if we can call it shortly. And in order to enforce this convention, the Council of Europe created the European Court of Human Rights. The European Convention was around since 1950, and Russia only joined the Council of Europe in 1996 after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and ratified the convention only in 1998. And there was a requirement: if a state ratifies the European Convention, which prohibits capital punishment, it means that the state should abolish capital punishment. Unfortunately, in Russian legislation, in the criminal penal code, Уголовный кодекс, it's still around. You can, if you open it, there are for some crimes, there are punishment which is called capital punishment, смертная казнь. But the execution of capital punishment was not postponed. There is a moratorium on execution of capital punishment, and now all those who are sentenced for those crimes for which our capital punishment is possible, they sentence for life. So that's what happened in 1996. Initially, for at least a year or two, those lifers, I will call those who are punished for life as lifers. Initially, lifers had a right to 2 conjugal meetings. Conjugal meetings means family meetings. It may be parents or spouse or children, and conjugal meetings, it means to so there are 2 types of meetings: short-term meetings, which is now for 4 hours, and they are run through a glass and bars, so you can't touch your relative. And there's a conjugal meetings, or in Russian legislation it's called long-term meetings, which is maximum for 3 days. The lifer and the family members are put in one dorm, like a flat, without any guards present, and so they can enjoy the intimacy. They can speak, so nobody can hear. So initially, lifers had 2 such meetings per year, But in 1997, a new law on punishment, it's a punishment enforcement code was introduced. And there was a rule introduced in this code which says that for the first 10 years of imprisonment, lifers do not have a right to conjugal meetings. Therefore, I refer to this 10 years without the right to correspondence. So in order to get a right to meet your relatives, I mean, not yours, but in order for lifers to meet their relatives in private for at least 1 or 2 times a year, they had to wait for 10 plus years. 10 plus years, it means that it's not a set term. It's up to the administration of the prison, of the colony where the lifer is held. It's up to them to decide when this 10 years is over. It can be 11 years, and the 2 or even more, 2 litigants in the cases that I'm going to use today, the 10 years term lasted for 15 years. 15 years without being able to meet each other. So that's the big issue. The thing is, it's not the issue for prisoners. This could be a controversial issue, and if we have time, we will have a discussion with you all who are for this kind of extra or additional rights, or to meet your relatives in private, for lifers who actually very serious criminals, if you consider what they committed, why they were put behind bars for life. But the issue here is not only about lifers. It's actually more about the right to meet, the right of their family members, the mothers, fathers, spouses. We talk about lifers in Russia only could be men. Women cannot be sentenced for life. So we speak about only men. Therefore, their wives, their children, and I guess it doesn't matter what kind of person the lifer is. Their relatives love them anyway. That's the nature. Or at least most of them. Tuan, women cannot be sentenced for life? No. Is it in past only, or does it apply now too? It's now. I believe before in the Soviet Union, women could be sentenced for well, I'm not sure, but in Russia now, yes, only men. So let's start. So how it worked in practice. In 2004, our NGO received a call, consultation came from Zakharkin's family. Actually, a wife of a prisoner. At the time, he wasn't yet sentenced, but he was about to be sentenced for life. She approached us. She was maybe 34, 36 years old. And she said that she wants to have a child from his husband. But she doesn't have a right to conjugal meetings. Therefore, it's not possible to conceive a child if you don't have meetings. And we look at the legislation and we saw what I just described to you. There is no right to conjugal meetings for 10 plus years. we calculated 37, 36 years old plus 10 years old, 46. There's very little chance anyone can conceive a child when a woman is 46, especially taking into account you can't have meetings every day. It's just once a year, and there's no guarantee that this day will be the day, or 3 days allowed will be those 3 days, which is suitable for a woman to conceive. Of course, we help them to write an application to the administration of the prison. We get a refusal on the ground of this Article 125 and 127 of the Punishment Enforcement Code. And so the problem was not in how legislation is applied. The problem is in the legislation. Even if the head of the prison was a good guy, I guess there are some, but I'm not sure, they couldn't allow conjugal meetings because there is a prohibition in the law. So how can we change the issue in the law? There is only one court in Russia which can challenge the law. The local judge, the judge of the peace, a district court judge, or even appeal court judge, constitutional court, or cassational court judge cannot go against the law. They should apply it accordingly. The only remedy could give us is the Constitutional Court of Russia. So we applied to the Constitutional Court directly. I must say that it's a little bit legal issue, but it's important to continue the story. I try to put it simply. Back in 2004, anyone could apply to the Constitutional Court directly. If they see an issue in the law, they don't have to go through all the district court and then a cassation appeal and then go to the Constitutional Court. It was possible directly to apply, just to show that here's the family, one is in prison, one is a free person. They don't have a right to meet under this Russian law. So you changed the law before the Constitutional Court. Now it's not possible. It has been 20 years by now, almost 20 years. But so over the time, the Constitutional Court really cut their jurisdiction, cut the possibilities to apply to the Constitutional Court. But anyway, this remark is important to understand why we lost the case before the European Court of Human Rights. So we applied to the Constitutional Court and we got a decision, as opposed to the judgment. Decision is inadmissibility decision. It means that the court will not hear the case. And it happened in 2005. Here's the decision number. You can find it online on the Constitutional Court website. The core idea of this decision is the lifers may be limited in the possibility of having a child. This is a quote from the judgment. It's more or less long judgment, and they explain that if a person commits such a crime, this person should understand that he not only will lose his freedom, meaning liberty, right to movement, but also the right to have a child. It's quite a controversial restriction. There is no law, there's nothing in the Constitution which says that prisoners, even if lifers, lose their right to have a child. And the Constitutional Court can only, so to really describe you in very small, little words, the jurisdiction of the Constitutional Court. Those are 19 judges, soon there will be less. They have this weights, this classical picture of courts, weights. On one side of it, we put this law, punishment enforcement code. On another one, we put the Russian Constitution, which quite a good one, despite all those changes, recent changes. And they weight whether this law somehow limits the rights which are in the Constitutional Court. Which are in the Constitution. And for some reason, judges said that the rights of lifers are limited to even to have child. But in the Constitution, there is no such words. Where did they get them? Where did they get this limitation? Anyway, I'm quite unhappy about the court in general, the Constitutional Court. I have a lot of critics of this court, so please forgive me of being so negative about this court, but this is because of the 20 years of experience applying to this court. And then we applied to the European Court of Human Rights. Unfortunately, the European Human Rights rejected the application. This rejection was quite different from the one we received from the Constitutional Court. Constitutional Court sort of considered the case on the issue, but the Constitutional Court the European Court of Human Rights said, we won't hear this case because you didn't exhaust domestic remedies. Remember, I just explained to you that we jumped from the rejection of having a meeting, conjugal meeting, right to the Constitutional Court without filing a lawsuit against the prison administration and then appealing this decision. And according to the European Court of Human Rights rules, European Convention of Human Rights rules, in order to apply to the European Court, you have to exhaust domestic remedies. You have to go through all the courts. And we didn't do this, unfortunately. Therefore, the European Court didn't consider this issue. So this is how we ended the first part of the litigation on this case. Unfortunately, it was not successful, and even which was worse, this decision of 9th of June 2005 very often was quoted later on during our litigation. So we kind of created a bad precedent, although sort of a precedent issued by the Constitutional Court. So, and it's already, the second case was a Horoshenko case, but at the time we didn't know about Horoshenko. This is another life prisoner, Andrei Horoshenko, and I'm going to refer to this guy quite often today. He litigated this case by himself, and he couldn't have any meetings for 15 years with his mother and father. And finally, by the time he was allowed to have conjugal meetings with his family, his father and mother, they were already were unable to visit the correctional colony. They were too weak, too old to travel to this colony, and eventually they died without meeting him. So he got the same rejection. He got this from the prisoners' authorities. And then he applied to the Constitutional Court, and the same judgment may be limited in the right to family life. It's a little bit different because he didn't ask for a meeting with his wife. His wife was separated from him, divorced him by the time. He just asked to have a meeting with his mother and father and his son. And by the way, he is in touch with his son now, and his son is working, helping to free Andrei from the prison. Anyway, the decision was he may be limited in the right to family life. Again, there is nothing in the Constitution to say you committed a crime, you don't have a family anymore. There's no such law. And by the way, when we speak about the Harkin case, I moved this little slide back. Decision was about that the lifer may be limited in the possibility of having a child. But wait a minute, our application to the Constitutional Court was from two people, the lifer and his wife. His wife is not a prisoner. She didn't commit any crime. Why? She may be limited in possibility of having a child from a person she wants to. And the Constitutional Court it's tricky. It's a very bad trick. They didn't mention the applicant, the second applicant, although the application from two people. Or at least they didn't mention her arguments. Why do you limit my rights by the law? I'm not a lifer. The punishment enforcement code does not rule my rights, does not provide any rights or limits my rights. Okay, so and Andrei Horoshenko applied to the ECHR, and I put 3 dots, which is not full stop. There was no full stop here. Luckily, Andrei Horoshenko got through the European Court of Human Rights. And later on, there was a decision on his case. To this decision, I will refer later on. It's another good story about why the Harkins case was stopped by the European Court and the application of Horoshenko got through. Why did he get through? Okay, good question. I actually was going to make a little pause on this presentation and tell you this short story. Second case, what is the difference compared to this first one? Well, I guess they were quite different. They were written by different people, and I don't have a copy of this application, but the second application. But I know a lawyer who worked for the Secretariat of the European Court of Human Rights. Right now, he is a lawyer in Moscow, advocat, also practicing before the European Court of Human Rights, a good friend of mine. Now, he told me this story. He said, Horoshenko case was also doomed to be rejected. And there was a conclusion saying that this case is inadmissible. And he was assigned to this case, and he looked at this case again, and he wrote a positive conclusion and passed it to the judges. And it worked so well so that this case the case in the European Court of Human Rights could be considered by, back then, 2 different chambers. Chamber of 7 judges and the Grand Chamber, 17 judges. And it's not even was admissible. This case was assigned to the Grand Chamber. So that's the trick legal systems can play. Yeah, our case could be this one, but anyway, it's good that his application get through. So, and it was 2004, maybe he applied to the European Court of Human Rights in 2005, but it took so many years. And this case was not considered until 2015. I mean, his consideration of his case started in 2010. And again, it's interesting. I just get back from Cambridge, arrived to Russia, started to practice law again in 2009. And in 2009, I got a letter from a prison from Andrei Horoshenko. I didn't know this guy back then. And he described his case, and he asked whether I could be, my NGO could be whether we could represent his case before the European Court of Human Rights. And I remember, I said, wow, that's a great case. This is about our Korolov's case. Let's do this. And I signed, I wrote a letter to Andrei, and I said, here is the power of attorney you have to fill in. Here's my signature. Please sign it and send it to the European Court. But unfortunately, he wrote these letters to all the lawyers he could find in Russia. And he agreed or accepted the help from another lawyer who was the first one to write the letter. Anyway, this case was not run by us, but then our ways also, paths also all met again. Anyway, we didn't know about this case, development of this case, until 2014. Around the same time, I met Veronika Koroleva, the one who is on the right on the picture. She approached our NGO saying the same story as the Harkins story. They don't have a right to conjugal meetings. His back then friend in 2008 was sentenced to life imprisonment. Veronika married him. He knew him before the crime was committed, and his sentence. She married him in 2009. The marriage took place in the correctional colony. But their first conjugal meeting took place in 2017, after we successfully challenged the law at the Constitutional Court. And I will explain to you how we get to this first victory in 2016. So the same story, no right to conjugal meetings, no possibility of conceive a child naturally. We already had this experience going through courts with the Harkins case, no success, and we knew nobody's going to change the position, the precedent, and we decided we won't go the same way as the Harkins family went through. We're going to challenge, we're going to ask for a right to artificial insemination. So we wrote to a correctional colony administration. We asked not for conjugal meetings, but we asked for a possibility of carrying out the artificial insemination procedure. It was a long correspondence because nobody knew how it works, how we didn't know any details how it was going to work. In all this correspondence, of course, we show that Veronika is going to take all the expenses which are associated with artificial insemination. So no expenses on the state. All we needed to figure out is how to take biological materials from her husband, Nikolai, to the clinic, specialized clinic. We figured out that it's not possible to do it in the colony, in the prison. It's not possible to deliver biological materials to a specialized clinic, even if we have a permission to get this material from a prisoner to Veronica, and Veronica comes to Moscow, for example, with this material. It's not possible. The material should be, sorry, I'm not using these correct medical terms. I keep forgetting them, but they should be freezed, not really freezed, but well, freezed, but not to the temperature of 0 degrees, but lower. Anyway, it should be done within 1 or 3 hours after biological materials were extracted from the donor. And there's no such equipment in prison, of course. It's not specialized clinic. There is no such clinic nearby this prison. Prison is located in поселок Харп, which is in Ямало-Ненецкий автономный округ. The closest town is Labytnangi. If you take a train, it's going to take 2 days, 48 hours to reach. And then from this town to the prison, it's another, I don't know how many hours of driving. So physically it's impossible. The only way is if Nikolai is transferred to Moscow or Ekaterinburg or any city which has the specialized clinic. Take biological material from him and run to the specialized clinic. Although also it's not possible to, for example, take this material and then put it into like a thermos. There is no such equipment which could be used. So it means basically run with this probirka to a clinic. So the problem was to bring Nikolai from this north prison to Moscow and then carry out this procedure. The prisoners rejected it. The Federal Administration of Prisons, ФСИН, also Федеральная система исполнения наказаний, ФСИН, rejected this right. So we filed a lawsuit to a district court and we challenged this refusal. We had 3 defenders, the colony itself, the Federal Administration of Prisons of the Ямало-Ненецкий округ, and the Federal Bureau of Imprisonment. So the only demand was to oblige the administration to temporarily transfer Krylov closer to clinic. Theoretically, and actually in reality, it's possible because during his imprisonment since 2008, he once was transferred to Moscow for consideration of another criminal case against him. And of course, they put him on a train, special train, brought it to Moscow. And anyway, this time, for this purpose, they rejected. And actually, in Russian law, there is no such a right to artificial insemination. There is no such a right as to ask for a family member to have her husband to be transferred to Moscow or somewhere else. There's no such right. Basically, Russian law is silent about it. There's a gap. but we the colony members, the administration of the colony referred to this Article 125 and Article 127 as a sort of general rules. Our argument before the court was Article 8 of the European Convention of Human Rights, as it is interpreted and understood in the Dixon versus the United Kingdom. Article 8, it's a right to private and family life. It's a very wide sort of article. So what is family and private life? Who can give a definition? If somebody hears my phone calls, it's a violation of the right to private life, privacy, and family rights. If somebody overhears me speaking to my wife, if there is a limitation of having meetings with the family members, it's a violation of family life. If there is if we ask for artificial insemination and we are rejected, our request is rejected, it's a violation of Article 8. Luckily, we had a case, although it's not against Russia, it's against the UK, United Kingdom, but it's very much similar case. Dixon's, actually, I think it's called Dixon's, plural. It's a family of 2 prisoners. Actually, it's even stronger case because in Dixon's, they were both family members, both spouses were prisoners. Wife was not a lifer. She later was served her sentence, but her husband was lifer. And they met through writing letters to each other, and they wanted to have a child, and they appealed to prison authorities in the UK. The law of the United Kingdom didn't prohibit it. It was like I think in order to get access to artificial insemination, you have to ask for permission. So they asked for permission and they were rejected. So they appealed and went through the European Court of Human Rights. Initially, they lost in 2005, I think. They lost before a chamber of 7 judges, but the 7 judges their opinions were divided. 3 were for artificial insemination, 4 were against the applicants. And then they appealed to the Grand Chamber. The case was reconsidered and they won. I think it was not anonymous, but very much close to anonymous decision. So we based our case entirely on the European Convention and entirely on one precedent of the European Court of Human Rights. And the case I'm going to be talking the next week about secret organ harvesting. It was the same situation. Our case that we brought was also based just on the European Convention. It might be not significant, it might not sound significant to you, but for us it was very interesting, very significant from this, again, strategic litigation purpose. It's really like a good example case where you can show that the judge was faced with a 2 choice, whether apply to Russian law or the international law, European Convention. And the judge, for some reason, decided for international law. So here's Veronica going through different courts, bringing lawsuits, going to the colony. You see this EK 18. This is the one where her husband serves. And I'm going to put this video. This is a short video from, I think it's Channel 5. They broadcasted, they corresponded about this case. Wait a second.
Необычное дело интимного характера начал рассматривать Бабушкинский суд Москвы. 34-летняя женщина требует от Федеральной службы исполнения наказаний дать ей возможность забеременеть от своего супруга. Сейчас он отбывает пожизненный срок за терроризм в колонии Ямало-Ненецкого автономного округа. По закону, таким осужденным длительное свидание с родными предоставляется лишь спустя первые 10 лет заключения. Ждать любящая женщина не хочет и говорит, что согласна даже на искусственное оплодотворение. Андрей Ивлев оценил драматизм судебных страстей.
I'm sorry, this is not English. No, there are no English subtitles. Sorry. Anyway, let's keep it then.
Необычное дело интимного характера.
Those who would want to listen to this recording, basically, it says the same what I explained to you. You already know the issue of this case. I just wanted to show how journalists shared it with the audience, because it's part of strategic litigation. This kind of cases, usually one of the goals of strategic litigation is not to win a case in the court of law. Another goal of strategic litigation is to win the case in the court of people's minds. You have to change how they think. You have to show them, yes, this is a very unusual case. It's a 50-50 opinion of those who hear about this case. Somebody can say, oh, he was accused, he was sentenced for terrorism activity, and he deserves this, no right, any rights. But then if you think about it closer, it's not about him, it's about his wife, it's about a future child, if there are rights of a future unborn child. So every time we would go to a court, we will issue a press release, we will contact journalists so they can come, try to understand and report. And particularly, it actually works in this case, and it works even better in the next case I'm going to talk about next week. The secret organ harvesting. And now one of the TV stations making a documentary, investigative documentary on this. Okay, I'm going to share with you this link to the presentation, and you can why don't I do it right?
It's 14 hours.
Okay, we have 1 hour left. I'm gonna share with you the link. Yeah, не работает. Usually you can click here. Anyway, won't lose time. So here's the timeline of how we would bring this case. Now remember, we started from 2004 courts on the Harkin case, and then the Harkin we applied to the ECHR The next one was in 2014, so almost 10 years after, when we brought the Korolyov's case to Babushkinsky District Court here in Moscow. And then this is the case on artificial insemination. We lost this case, and the court supported this side of the prison authorities. Then we appealed to the Moscow City Court. And then we went to the Presidium of Moscow Court with the cassation, and then the Supreme Court of Russia. All of them rejected our application. And then we went to the Constitutional Court again. So it's kind of a second time we went to the Constitutional Court. The first one was the Kharkin case. And you remember what they said? No right to have a child. No right to family life. So Constitutional Court again, and without waiting for a decision of the Constitutional Court, we also went to the ECHR. You see, this time, well, actually, in 2004, we were not able to go to the Constitutional Court directly. We had to go through all these courts. And we didn't have this goal to jump right to the Constitutional Court, quick. This time, we really wanted to develop strategic litigation campaign, bring a case. And actually, when you bring a case to a court, this is a good way to investigate. Defenders share documents. They have to. Maybe not all of them, but whatever they share really opens a picture to you. This is especially true about the second case I'm going to talk next week, how organ harvesting for transplantation is carried out. Nobody knows. The only official document available is the law on transplantation of organs and tissues, which is very short, really nothing in this law. And then the rest is regulated by different instructions, orders by Ministry of Health. So anyway, it was very good to run this litigation, and also from the point of view, not only investigative point of view, but also from the point of view of public campaign, reaching to people through the media, changing their minds, trying to make them think differently. The Constitutional Court rejected our application. And we had a chance to go to a district court once again with the same family, with Korolyovs. And I'm gonna share with you how it happened. Here's another video. I don't know why I cannot share it. This is another video on the appeal. And yes, so here's the summary of how Russian district court judge, and all the other judges who considered Korolyov's case, how they actually considered our arguments. They mostly referred to this 2005 decision of the Constitutional Court, which is on the Kharkin's case, may be limited in the possibility of having a child. As to the Dixon versus the United Kingdom, the judge says Dixon is not applicable as it is not against Russia and based on different circumstances. Again, this shows how judge mistakenly understand precedent. And the second of all, it shows that Russian judge doesn't know rulings by the Russian Supreme Court. Actually, by that time, by 2014, we had two major rulings, we call it regulations, by the plenum of the Supreme Court. Plenum of the Supreme Court is a sort of gathering of all the judges of the Supreme Court, and they give guiding regulations, which is not a judgment on a particular case, but a sort of general ruling, like a precedent, how judges should follow the law. And by 2014, the Supreme Court gave us two such guiding regulations devoted to the application of the European Convention on Human Rights and the case law of the ECHR. And then in this explanation, the Supreme Court and those guiding rulings, guiding rules of the Supreme Court are has legal force for local district judge. So those guiding regulations say Russian judges shall apply judgments of the European Court of Human Rights, even if they are against another state, in order to avoid the same mistake made against Russia. But the judge simply ignored those. What was more interesting, how the district court judge explained why, again, the right of Veronica, a wife, or right to conceive a child, was completely ignored. The judge only talked about the prisoner. And she said that the punishment given to Nikolai Korolev is just vengeance, kara, так и написала, kara, for crimes committed by him. Kara, vengeance, it means, what in Russian? Глаз за глаз, да? But this is not Russian law. It's not in the law. You cannot have a kara, vengeance, in the law. So we lost this case, but again, the goal of strategic litigation was to collect mistakes from district court judge, Moscow City Court, all this cassation, and from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court also ignored, a judge of the Supreme Court also ignored her own regulation issued a year before, which is that they have to follow not only cases of the European Court against Russia, but also against other states. So another goal of strategic litigation was to collect those mistakes, so we can build a case against Russia for the European Court of Human Rights. I'm always joking with my students. I say we sue. What is the English word for шить? Мы шьем дело. We pin in the case. We collect it so we can bring it to the European Court of Human Rights. And then I say that surprisingly, cases are not being bound together in the European Court of Human Rights. They held in folders, each sheet of paper separately, not combined together. Unlike in Russian courts, Russian judges or their secretaries, they really сшивают дело, sue the cases together. And they use this drills, дрели, чтобы прошивать все это. Просто очень смешно. Anyway, so we lost this case but we won a lot. We really collected a lot of information. We spread the news around. We initiated discussions. We really almost case for the European Court of Human Rights. Yes, we lost it in the national courts, and all of a sudden, bang, Andrei Horoshenko won his case against Russia in the European Court of Human Rights. Remember this argument? Dixon is not applicable as it is not against Russia. And here we have a case which is against Russia. So now Russian judges will not be able to say, oh, Horoshenko is against the United Kingdom. No, it's against Russia. Please apply. So it happened on June 30th, 2015. 17 judges of the European Court anonymously, all of them, 17, said, this is a violation of a right to family and private life. No conjugal meetings, it's a violation, full stop. And 2 judges, one from Portugal and one from Russia, they joined and they said, prohibition of visits for 10 plus years in itself cruel and inhuman treatment and punishment. It's Article 3. Article 3 has a title, and it's a very strong title. It's called Prohibition of Torture. So 2 judges considered limitation of family and private life almost like a torture. This article has 2 parts, prohibition of torture, and then after comma, cruel and inhuman treatment and punishment. So this is punishment. Remember what the judge said? The punishment given to Nikolai is kara, which is inhuman punishment. So we really were surprised and happy about this case. We run and translated into Russian. All the judgments of the European Court are issued in English or French. This one was in English and French, and we needed it in Russian so we can show it to a judge, Russian judge. But if we translated it ourselves and showed it to a judge, it wouldn't be that binding for a judge. We really approached a publisher, the Bulletin of the ECHR. It's a well-respected publisher which publish translation of the judgments of the European Court. They translated it, and it's nice paper, nice journal, journal. And we applied to the correctional colony, and we asked for, this time on behalf of Korolevs again, and we asked not for artificial insemination, but this time for conjugal meetings, because Horoshenko case was about conjugal meetings, not about artificial insemination. He didn't need to inseminate. He wanted to have meetings with his parents and son. So, and our application to the head of the colony was based entirely on Horoshenko case, because there's nothing in Russian law again. But of course, we get a rejection. It says there's no reason. It's impractical to give meetings right now, because in 10 years, they will have a meeting. Sounds very funny, right? Why do you need meetings right now? Just wait for 10 years and you will have it. So funny. And we went back to the Babushkinsky district court in Moscow to secure the right to conjugal meeting. This time, our application, our lawsuit was not about, we didn't want to ask prison authorities to allow artificial insemination, but we asked for conjugal meetings. So you see, there is a problem. The problem is it's not about meetings or artificial insemination. The problem is a possibility of having a child. You can have it. You can achieve this right. You can conceive a child through conjugal meetings or through artificial insemination. It doesn't matter for Korolyovs. The goal is to have a child. So in strategic litigation, it's very important to determine the key issue and try to attack it through different angles. Initially, we did it via conjugal meetings, and then through artificial insemination, and then through conjugal meetings again when we get an additional argument, Horoshenko case. And meanwhile, well, I already said that they apply to the ECHR. They apply to the Constitutional Court. And one second now. It has been a while since this case happened, and yes. So we went to the Babushkinsky District Court, and our entire application was actually copied and pasted from the arguments from the ECHR judges. I remember when I was sitting in the kitchen trying to compose the application, and I thought, why should I come up with the arguments? I just look at the Horoshenko case, I copied those arguments, and I send it to the district court judge, so that the district court judge won't argue with me, representative of Korolyov, won't argue with Veronika Korolyova, or let alone prisoner, live prisoner. Let the district court argue with 17 highest European court judges. So we went to the second time to district court, and our arguments were based on Article 8, right to family, private life, and interpreted not only in Dixon versus the United Kingdom, but also in Horoshenko versus Russia. And we also, it just happened that just before the district court judge started to consider the case, we had a Russian Supreme Court overview, cases overview. And the Supreme Court actually referred to Horoshenko case, which helped us. We only have this case translated in the ECHR bulletin, which is not actually published by the European Court of Human Rights. So we needed somehow to legitimize this translation. And here the Supreme Court showed that, look, there's a Horoshenko case. And although we got this additional arguments based on Horoshenko case, we get additional support from the Russian Supreme Court, we didn't really expect to win. And surprisingly, on the 9th of February 2016, we won, well, partially at least, which was quite a surprise to hear from a judge. The judge, a district court judge, recognized that the refusal to have a conjugal meeting is illegal. It means that Russia shall follow Article 8 of the European Convention and Horoshenko case. But the judge was not strong enough or willing enough to prescribe a conjugal meeting. It was up to a judge to say, the refusal is illegal. I order a conjugal meeting for this family once a year, but which is really a partial judgment because it means that the authorities of the prison should reconsider, but they can reconsider in any way. They can allow and they can reject again. So it means that we have to go to the court again and again and again. And there won't be any meetings. Moscow court, this time, well, of course, we applied to the Moscow court, but also Colony also applied to the district to the Moscow court. And again, Moscow City Court quoted the same judgment of 2005, saying maybe limited in the possibility of having a child. And then we went back to the Constitutional Court. But this time, and again, here, this slide shows what is strategic litigation. Yes, you target the issue through different sides, artificial insemination, right to meetings, maybe something else. You attract media to show, you try to win the minds of people. But also it's very strategic to have more than one applicant. For example, why we couldn't continue litigating a case of Zakharkin, because finally the family fell apart. So this time we had 3 more families joining this case, this strategic case. We had a family of Rudiks, which are older parents of the child who was sentenced for life. We had a family of Olesya and Oksana Matsinini. It's a wife and a daughter of a life prisoner. And we also had Andrei Horoshenko himself, as his case was won, and we, on behalf of Andrei, we applied to the Russian Constitutional Court asking to challenge this law, which didn't allow us conjugal meetings. So all those applications, 4 applications, met at the Constitutional Court. And the Constitutional Court considered 2 cases, Korolyov's cases and Matsinini. Matsinini, this one on the picture, they were not in Moscow, and they were in a remote region of Russia. We couldn't travel there, we couldn't help them there, and our help was only limited through sort of written consultation, telephone calls, and we instructed Oksana how to bring the same case as Veronica brought in a Moscow court, district court. So Oksana did it herself through our, well, we actually prepared all the applications. She just submitted it and orally argued before the judge, and then she actually secured a very good judgment, a district court judgment, much better than the one I was talking about on Veronica's case and Nikolai Korolyov's case. The judge not only said the rejection of the conjugal meeting was illegal, but also prescribed a meeting. Unfortunately, or maybe luckily for the case, the higher court considered the appeal of the prison authorities, and they paused the case and sent the request to the Constitutional Court to consider this issue. So those 2 applications of Korolyov's, which we sent to the Constitutional Court, and the regional court on Matsinini case, those 2 requests and applications met, and the Constitutional Court actually said that they're going to consider this case. Unfortunately, there was no public hearing. I guess they didn't want a public discussion of lifers getting the right to conjugal meetings. Unfortunately, the Constitutional Court only considered facts on the lack of conjugal meetings. Right to artificial insemination facts were not considered, were ignored by the Constitutional Court. And the court changed its legal position in the Harkins case. Remember, the prisoners lose their right to have a child, to have a family life. But they didn't admit that back in 2004 or 5 they made a mistake. They said it's just the circumstances has changed, the international law has changed. Anyway, who would admit the mistake? It's good enough that the Constitutional Court judges actually were able to reconsider their position. They applied all the ECHR arguments from Harashenko case and even from this Dixon's case, which is a good victory for lawyers. Actually, this judgment now is very often used when students are being taught in the class of the constitutional law. I just know it from my colleagues who teach it. Also, the Constitutional Court allowed one conjugal meeting per year, which is also unusual because usually Constitutional Court says this law is unconstitutional, and then the legislator, State Duma, has to change it, and then you will have a right. But this time they said it's illegal, and you don't have to wait for change in the legislation. You have a conjugal meeting. Unfortunately, the Constitutional Court refused reconsideration of Korolyov's case on artificial insemination and awarded very little court expenses, just 10,000 rubles. I don't know if you have time for this, but I should pause here for a little while to say about legal expenses or gonorar успеха, how we call it. We didn't charge nobody for these cases, no Korolyov or Matsinin. We did it all for free. But when we won the case, we asked for these expenses from a state. And there is a procedure to ask the Constitutional Court to award such expenses. And by that time, it was about 700,000 rubles of expenses that we calculated, which is also very small, but we did it, we showed it, we asked for it. And the Constitutional Court awarded just 10,000, 70 times less. And this is a very important issue because 10,000, it's like a message to a strategic litigation lawyer, to a litigator, a human rights activist, saying, here's your 10,000. As we say in Russia, maybe there is an English expression, не отказывай себе ни в чем. Do anything you want with those money. Go crazy. Yeah? And it means that here's your 10,000, but you have to know that next time you come to the Constitutional Court with another very important case, and even if you won this case and you will change the legislation and many people will benefit from this case, all you will get for your work is 10,000. You worked for 14 years of your life. Here's your 10,000. And this is the policy of the Russian Constitutional Court. Russian lawyers who won the case, who changed the law, they don't have a right to gonorar успеха. When we brought the case to the European Court of Human Rights, we also asked for expenses. And now we're waiting for the judgment of the European Court. And it's going to be very, very interesting to compare expenses which were awarded by the Constitutional Court and expenses which we will have awarded by the European Court of Human Rights. I hope it's going to be a good material for an article. Why Russian Constitutional Court decided to change the law? Why they 19, I think there were 18 judges considered this case. One of them was sick by the time. But why they changed their opinion, which they had in 2005? Just to remind you or show you the politics situation, in 2015, the Constitutional Court of Russia ruled that they have a right to decide which judgment of the European Court of Human Rights will be executed, will be followed up, or will not be executed. It's famous, at least for lawyers, it's a very famous judgment of the Constitutional Court. It's a very bad judgment, and it's very illogical, illegal. They didn't have this authority. It's not written anywhere. They just fuck it from their finger and come up with this authority to decide which judgment to consider, to execute, and which judgment of the European Court will not be executed. And then there was another judgment of the Constitutional Court on prisoners' right to vote. And they said that they won't execute this judgment. It's a controversial, even European Court of Human Rights judgment, but we won't go into the detail. And then around the same time, there was a case of Yukos versus Russia. And the Constitutional Court says, we won't execute this judgment, which is understandable because the damages that were awarded reached almost 2 billion euros. And I think by the case of Korolyov's, the Constitutional Court wanted to show good will that they're going to follow ECHR judgment. They want to execute them. They're going to rule based on the European Court of Human Rights judgment. I think they didn't want, in this kind of political situation, they didn't want to argue with the ECHR, and there was no real argument. I mean, if you look at the arguments that I copied from the Horoshenko case and pasted into the application for the Constitutional Court judges to consider, I don't know how we can come up with something else, like something else not stupid. If they would come up with this kind of other arguments against the right to conjugal meetings, how can you, in 2016, explain that wives of prisoners do not have a right to meet their husbands without going crazy and stupid? So I think they didn't have a choice to rule otherwise. And here she went to the first conjugal meeting in 2017. I took her to the airport. So what are the consequences of the Constitutional Court judgment of actually Harshenko versus Russia case at the European Court of Human Rights, plus Korolyov's case and Matsin's case at the Constitutional Court? All of the 1,800 lifers received the right to conjugal meeting. Later on, I had a conversation with Andrei Harashenko, and he said that this announcement was made on the radio in the prison. And the prison authorities said about this Constitutional Court's judgment and announced that now everybody will have a right to one conjugal meetings. And there was an outcry in the cells. Which I think equally important, at least, all their relatives, mothers, fathers, children, spouses, receive this right to meetings. Later on, very quickly, legislation was changed. I think it's next year. And new dorms are built to accommodate visitors. It's important because before this change came through, there was very little dorms which accommodate relatives which are coming to meet. And now the numbers, I don't know, doubled, tripled, and they needed new dorms to accommodate visitors. So now we have okay. Although we won the case in the Constitutional Court, because they received the right to conjugal meetings, but Nikolai and Veronika Korolyova, they didn't lose their status of victims, which is obligatory to bring a case to the European Court of Human Rights. Why it's so? Because yes, they were allowed to have conjugal meetings, but they were not compensated for their moral sufferings for the previous 10 years without conjugal meetings. 8 years. The goal is still there to conceive a child. They are unable to conceive a child having meetings once a year. They need artificial insemination. There are some additional fair trial issues, legal costs, but and we expect this judgment any day, any day really. Yes, and I think this is what I had to say today. Thank you. We can have a discussion if you feel like it. Here's this book that I promised you to share. You can download it to your phones and then forward it to your emails. This is a book called How to Bring the Man Down. I don't know if it's the correct translation into English. Как положить чиновника на лопатки. How to basically run. The book is in Russian, yes. And if you non-Russian, I can send you a chapter in another book, which is in English. Yes, I will do so. I will publish the presentation in Canvas, but and I will publish all I promised, this book and the article. If anybody want to contact me or remind me about the book, of course I will do it. But please, all this means my phone number on all the messengers. Feel free to contact me and ask the questions. And please, if you have any questions, let's talk, let's discuss. Let's argue if you want to. If anyone wants to download this book right now, you can do this. So maybe you're writing questions right now, and while you're writing, I will ask you, what do you think? Do lifers, particularly those who are sentenced for terrorism, do they have a right to family life? Do they have a right to conceive a child? Do they have a right to raise a child? What do you think?
Well, I personally think that depends on the severity of the crime, but the unfairness here is that their relatives, they deserve the right to have him as a family member. That's the thing that's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It sounds very interesting, right? So you might think this issue is controversial. They might not have a right to family life because of the crime. It depends on the severity. But then when you look at the family members, you think, oh, but they have a right. But how they will execute this right without meeting this criminal, without granting this right to a criminal, it means that this lifer has a right to a family member, to family life, because of their family members. You see, it's so connected.
And the court, they will make the laws, like they are allowed to change the law. The consecutive court or Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court doesn't have a jurisdiction to change the law. They can change the way the law is being interpreted, which is equally actually important in some cases. But the only court in Russia which has a jurisdiction to change the law is the Russian Constitutional Court.
So how will this Constitution Court like change the law? Like, what's the normal protocol? Because it seems so subjective to me. Like they think that it should be like this, and so they decide that. It's not really objective, isn't it?
Well, first of all, the judgment is quite lengthy. They have arguments. They lay down the arguments in the judgment. They explain why the law should be changed. Of course, it's very subjective. I mean, people write it. It's not a thermometer or a test which you give and the doctor says, oh, it shows COVID-19, 100%. Even those tests have failed. But this is entire jurisprudence. It's not actually science. It's more like a politics. I think you all have backgrounds of science. A law is not science. It's really politics. It's really about catching the moment, trying to advance the rights, the law, to change the law. It's not like you take time for your research in the libraries of Cambridge, Congress, and you come up with brilliant ideas, brilliant arguments for the rights of lifers to have conjugal meetings, and it doesn't mean it become a law. no matter how your arguments are great and heavy, it really depends how you're going to advance those arguments before those judges who have a jurisdiction to accept those arguments. Very subjective. Anyway, if you don't have any questions, thank you for taking this lecture without any breaks. For 1 hour and 45 minutes, I hope... oh, there's a question. Daria asks, there could be same eugenics arguments against having a child, like we should not allow this bad criminals genes to spread, though I'm not agree with it. It's very often used arguments. Do not allow to spread those genes, but there's no science showing that there's it's true. I mean, look at the family of Nikolai Korolev. There are no criminals in the family, in his family. Actually, his father is a professor, very well-known professor. He, for some reason, was able to spread those genes. Did the court use these arguments? No, they're not. It would be very interesting if they used it. There are also arguments used, which is more against a woman to have a child. They say, we should not allow a single mother to raise a child, which is also a very strange argument, I think, because, well, first of all, what does it mean to be single? Of course, there won't be support from his husband, her husband. He's imprisoned, but there are letters. There are they talk every day through their letters, through their phone calls, and also look at the general statistics. How many single mother or single father families around Russia? So we should remove children from them so they won't be able to harm them by raising the child alone? I don't think so.
I have a small question on the second or third case. You mentioned that the man was sentenced in 2008, but he got married with another woman in 2009. How is that possible?
Not another. He married Veronica.
Yes. But he was sentenced in 2008, so he shouldn't be allowed to have meetings with her in 10 years. So how can he meet her and have a wedding on 2009?
Well, they made an exception. First of all, there's no prohibition for prisoners to marry anyone, although Russian constitution says that might be limited. Their family lives could be limited, yes. But very often, especially lifers, are getting married without meeting their wives. Physically meeting. They write letters, they fall in love, they marry, and particularly Korolev family was given an exception. They were allowed to, not only to conclude a marriage legally, but they also were allowed to have this church ceremony. Therefore, you're able to see them on a picture together. They just were able to stand together for 5 minutes to have the ceremony finished. So if this is the answer, if I understood.
Yes, yes, that's exactly what I asked. And yeah. The court said that the lifer lose the right to a family life, but they are still allowed to get married?
Yeah.
Okay.
One hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, this was the Karalovs were allowed to have this wedding ceremony in the church, wedding, and they took this picture. Of course, it was all done by the authorities. It wasn't a guest. There was no guests who took a picture of newly married, and then they published it. I mean, they tried to show this was a good initiative, and then, as Veronica told me, they were punished for this. They were criticized by the higher authority, a prison authority, and I guess they never repeat it again. Anyway, if no more questions, I'm again thankful for you to be with me today for almost 2 hours without any breaks. I hope it was easy to follow, and you will be able to read more on this book. I will upload everything to Canvas, and I would like to invite you to the next part of this lecture next week, the same time, and we will speak about the right to, well, not actually a right. Yeah, we're going to speak about right of privacy, family life, and right to be free from inhuman and degrading treatment, and which comes from secret organ harvesting. Today in Russia, anyone could be put in a situation that his or her organs would be removed without permission of a donor or permission of a family member, the closest family member. And this is now in the law, and this is now happening, and it's happening even with foreigners. I see that in your group there are people not from Russia, from foreign countries. We all are under this law that we're going to talk about next week. And I will show you through the examples of 3 cases how we're trying to change the law for at least now 7 years. Another big case, big litigation. And actually, if anybody would like to know more about this litigation, you can read it in this book. It's in chapter 8. For those who could not read in Russian, I will upload an article which has both Korolyov's case and the secret organ harvesting case described shortly. So it will be easier for you to follow the next lecture. Olga, thank you for this ambiguous topic covered. Oh, okay. You're welcome. I'm glad, I don't know, 4 more people are aware of this now. So now, maybe this year, when you hear the news that the European Court of Human Rights issued this judgment, and I'm sure it's going to be covered a lot on the media, you'll hear it, so you know what is it about. Okay. I'm going to take a screenshot so we can see who were attending the class. If there are no more questions, I wish you a good week, interesting lectures during this week and next week. I saw the timetable of your lectures. Oh, I wish I could attend at least half of them. It's very interesting topics. Good idea to give you an opportunity to think about something not really related to your major profession. I hope to see you next week on Monday.
Yes, thank you for
Thank
the
you.
lecture.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.